On a sunny afternoon in 1979, a group of Apple engineers walked into a research facility in Palo Alto. They weren't there to buy anything. They were there to witness a miracle. What they saw inside the walls of Xerox PARC would go on to define the next 4 decades of the global economy. They saw a graphical user interface, a mouse, and Ethernet networking. They saw the blueprint for the modern computer age. But here is the irony that haunts business school case studies to this day. Xerox owned the future, yet they watched as it was snatched away, leading to a decade of decay where they shed $17 billion in market valuation. To understand how a company that effectively invented the personal computer could lose its way so completely, we have to look past the hardware and into the boardrooms of Rochester, New York. In the early 1970s, Xerox was the undisputed king of the office. Their copiers were not just machines, they were literal money printers. With a profit margin that made Wall Street salivate, the company sat on an absolute mountain of cash. But leadership felt a chill in the air. They were terrified that digital technology would eventually make paper obsolete. So, they did what any corporate giant would do: they invested heavily in research. They opened the Palo Alto Research Center, or PARC, and recruited the brightest minds in computing. They told these geniuses to build the office of the future. And they did. The team at PARC delivered everything. They didn't just invent the personal computer, they invented the way we interact with screens today. But wait. It gets worse. The executives back in New York didn't understand it. They saw these revolutionary inventions as just accessories to the high-margin copier business. They wanted to know how a computer would help sell more toner. When the answer was it won't, the corporate office effectively locked the doors on their own innovation. They treated these world-changing inventions as scientific curiosities, not commercial products. While Steve Jobs was literally stealing the Apple Lisa interface concepts from these labs, Xerox management was busy trying to merge with insurance companies and diversify into financial services. It was the classic innovator's dilemma on steroids. They were so blinded by their current cash cow, the copier, that they refused to recognize that their future was already sitting in their own lab, gathering dust. By the mid-1980s, the damage was becoming clear. Competitors like Canon and Ricoh were flooding the market with cheaper, more reliable copiers. Xerox, once a monopoly, was now fighting a bloody price war. They were forced to slash prices, which shredded their margins. They tried to pivot back to tech, but the talent had already left. The geniuses at PARC saw the writing on the wall and headed for the exits, taking their expertise to Silicon Valley startups that would eventually become the giants of the tech world. The leadership then made a series of catastrophic acquisitions, spending billions to enter the insurance market, only to sell those assets for a fraction of their value years later. The company began a slow, painful downward spiral. The stock price, once a blue-chip titan, began a steady decline. Between the loss of market share in printing and the disastrous failure to commercialize their own research, the value evaporation hit a staggering $17 billion in just 5 years of peak mismanagement. This wasn't just a failure of vision, it was a failure of structure. Xerox had become a behemoth governed by accountants rather than innovators. Every decision was run through a spreadsheet. If an idea couldn't prove a return on investment within 12 months, it was scrapped. They were playing a game of short-term quarterly results while their competitors were playing a game of long-term dominance. The climax of this tragedy came when they finally tried to force a comeback in the late 90s, but it was too little, too late. The culture had solidified into a bureaucracy that couldn't move at the speed of light. They had all the ingredients for a trillion-dollar empire, yet they burned the house down to keep themselves warm. They lost the desktop, they lost the printer war, and they lost the trust of their shareholders. The tragedy of Xerox is a stark warning to every CEO who thinks their current success will last forever. You can own the patent, you can hire the best minds, and you can hold the checkbook, but if you don't understand the product, you are already bankrupt. If you found this breakdown of corporate blindness infuriating, you absolutely must watch our next documentary on how Kodak ignored the digital camera revolution until it was too late. It is the perfect companion to this story of missed opportunities.